Word got around New York high society that the Harrisons had only one standard when choosing a husband to marry into the family: potent fertility. Because I was born with a strong constitution, robust health, and incredible stamina, the family matriarch, Mrs. Harrison, took one look at me and saw the fertility jackpot. She paid a fortune to bring me into their home. Behind my back, people called me the stud. What they didn't know was that every night, Candy would wrap her arms around my waist and tell me how much she loved my lean, muscular body. That was until New Year's Eve of our 5th year of marriage, when her assistant accidentally sent me a digital invitation. It read, Bride, Candy Harrison, Groom, Ethan Clark, wedding date, January 8th. Half an hour later, she was kneeling in the snow-covered courtyard, her hands trembling as she held out a medical report. Sonny, I have late-stage stomach cancer. I can't drag you and our son down with me. I suddenly picture her that morning, coughing in the kitchen as she made me soup. Then my eyes fell back on the fake report in my hands. After a long silence, I took the divorce papers and signed them without hesitation. Holding our son, I managed a small smile. From this day forward, our son takes my last name, Miller. He won't be in your Harrison family records, and he will have nothing more to do with any of you. As soon as I said it, everyone at the dinner table stared in shock. Mrs. Harrison lifted her cane and slammed it hard on the floor, her voice booming with authority. Candy, the Harrison family line is thin. We finally have a grandson, and I will not let the bloodline end with you. I held our son tighter and looked down, saying nothing. Mrs. Harrison's words were a clear warning to me. Candy dropped to her knees with a thud, pushing the medical report across the floor. Grandma, this all happened so suddenly. I had no other choice, she pleaded. I have late-stage stomach cancer. I don't have much time left. I can't be a burden to Sonny, so the only thing I can do is give him his freedom. She pressed her forehead to the floor, leaving a red mark. Her words sent a wave of gasps through the room. The relatives at the table immediately shifted their focus to Candy's health. Mrs. Harrison stood up, swaying slightly, and motioned for a maid to bring her the report. As she flipped through the pages, the color drained from her face. Is this real? Candy nodded. I found out during a full physical a few days ago. It's already in the final stages. The doctor said, I don't have much time. Then, she turned to look at me. Sonny, I'm so sorry. I can't keep my promise to grow old with you. The grief in her eyes looked genuine. A bitter, self-deprecating smile touched my lips. Candy, you know the truth perfectly well, I said. I'll repeat myself. We can get a divorce, but I'm taking our son. I then turned to Mrs. Harrison, who sat at the head of the table. That is my only condition. Candy's brow furrowed, and she opened her mouth to speak. Noah isn't just my son, he's a Harrison. I can't agree to that. Hearing my demand to take Noah, Mrs. Harrison's face hardened with displeasure. Candy's husband, do not repeat such an absurd statement again, the old woman said. My gaze was steady. I've made my position clear. It's my only condition. At my words, Candy looked at me, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. She seemed surprised that I wasn't causing a scene. She shuffled forward on her knees until she was beside me. Sonny, even if we divorce, Noah is still your son. He'll get a much better education if he stays with the Harrisons. She looked up at me. Doesn't every father want what's best for his child? Her attempts at persuasion were pathetic. It's no use saying all this to me. If you agree, we could go to City Hall right now. Candy straightened her back and looked up at her grandmother at the head of the table. She glanced at Noah in my arms, a flicker of pain in her eyes. Grandma, I have to go through with this divorce, she said firmly. Please, just agree to his terms. As she finished, she shot a dark, unreadable look in my direction. Mrs. Harrison was livid, her usual composure gone. Must you be so stubborn? The Harrisons have money and influence. No matter the cost, I will find a cure for your illness. Candy remained kneeling, her gaze resolute. Grandma, I'm dying. I'm begging you. Please grant me this one wish. Get out. Get out of my house. The Harrison family has no place for a disgrace like you. Head bowed, Candy walked out without another word and knelt in the courtyard. Grandma, even if you don't agree, I am getting this divorce. Seeing her so resolute, I felt a slight pang in my chest. I walked past her, holding our son in my arms. Candy grabbed my right arm, looking up at me. Sonny, for the sake of all our years together. I cut her off before she could finish. Tilting my head, I looked down at her from where I stood. Candy, did you think about our years together when you decided you wanted a divorce? I asked. Did you think about our years together when you decided you were willing to give up Noah? My questions left her speechless. Sonny, I pulled my arm from her grasp and walked away. The invitation for her wedding to Ethan Clark was still saved in my phone's photo gallery. There was a time when she had cared for me so deeply. We hadn't even met before our wedding day, yet she had still shown me the utmost respect. She sent handwritten wedding invitations and even personally designed my tuxedo. In front of the officiant, she made her vows to me. Sonny, now that we're married, I promise I will be good to you and fulfill my duties as a wife, she had said. I, Candy Harrison, want to spend the rest of my life growing old with you. How had everything changed so much? It snowed all night. When the maids finally helped to flush Candy back inside, I was in the middle of packing my suitcase. She leaned against the headboard, her eyes following me as I moved around the room. Sonny, I'm sorry. You're still young. You have a bright future ahead of you, she said softly. After the divorce, I'll ask Grandma to find a better match for you. With the Harrison family's support, you won't have to worry about a thing. Then she added, and as for Noah, Grandma has agreed. Every word was meant to sound like she was doing this for my own good, her eyes swimming with apology. I chuckled softly. Candy, you don't have to put on a show. We weren't in love when we got married, so this divorce should be a relief for both of us. I paused for a moment before adding, and you don't need to do any of that for me. I don't need it. Candy stared at me, taken aback. Looking at her familiar face, a wave of bitterness washed over me. Sonny, I looked away, unable to meet her gaze, and went back to my packing. We had only been married for 5 years, but somehow I had accumulated so much stuff. The entire room was filled with gifts from Candy. Suits, ties, shoes, and souvenirs she brought back for me from every city she visited on business trips. Each item was a reminder of the love we once shared. But none of that mattered anymore. I had arrived with only a few changes of clothes, and I would leave the same way. Just then, Mrs. Harrison came in with a doctor, and her expression turned to ice when she saw my packed suitcase on the floor. Candy's husband, you just can't wait to leave, can you? She sneered. I was wrong about you. People like you can only share the wealth, not the hardship. Her voice dripped with contempt. If she hadn't thought I could give the Harrisons an heir, she never would have given me a second glance. My voice was calm when I replied, I'd better hurry and get out of the way. It would be a shame if I delayed your search for my replacement. Candy's voice was sharp. Sonny, what are you talking about? I gave her a cold look. We're getting divorced on the 8th. City Hall opens then. Without another glance at her, I turned and went to the nursery to check on Noah. My mind drifted back to a few weeks ago. It was the week before New Year's when Ethan Clark showed up looking for Candy. He was pale and wearing nothing but a thin jacket against the cold. Candy, he said, and the moment he spoke, her eyes welled up with tears. She shot up from her chair, rushing over to him and tenderly draping her own coat over his shoulders. I am sorry, Kangi. I wouldn't have come to you if I had any other choice, he said, his voice cracking. Lily is sick. Please, I'm begging you, you have to help her. It was the first time I had ever seen Candy lose her composure like that. She left me and Noah without a second thought and walked out the door. She didn't come home that night. When Noah woke up, he crawled into my arms. Daddy, he mumbled. I leaned down and kissed his small cheek. Just then, Mrs. Harrison walked into the nursery. You gave the Harrison family a grandson. For that service, you will be well compensated, even in divorce. I don't know what Candy had said to her, but she had agreed to let me take Noah. I didn't turn down the money. Mrs. Harrison's cold eyes swept over me. If you hadn't given the Harrisons Noah, you wouldn't be getting a dime. I had no doubt she meant it. Grandma, please stop, Candy said, dragging her exhausted body over to stand in front of me, just like she used to. She was shielding me from her grandmother's insults. I remember back when we were first married, before she got pregnant. Mrs. Harrison would find all sorts of potency-boosting remedies and brew them into bitter tonics for me to drink every single day. The stuff tasted awful. I didn't want to drink it, but I didn't dare refuse. Candy would always step in, usher her grandmother out of the room, and then pour the tonic down the drain. If you don't want it, you don't have to drink it, she'd say. I would look at her, my heart filled with happiness, but I'd still be worried. What if your grandmother finds out? She would playfully nip my nose. If you don't say anything, and I don't say anything, how will she know? I didn't marry you just to have a son. Back then, I truly believed she was the one for me. That is, until 2 weeks ago when I discovered a huge secret on her laptop. There was an encrypted folder filled with thousands of photos of her with another man. I was looking through them, one by one, when Candy walked into the study. The moment she saw me on her laptop, she flew into a rage, rushing over to snatch it away. Sonny, who said you could touch my computer? Her voice was loud and harsh. I was so stunned I just froze, staring at her in disbelief. After a moment, she seemed to realize she had gone too far. Her tone softened, and she stepped forward, wrapping her arms around me. I am sorry, honey. I didn't mean to snap. I just panicked. I took a deep breath and gestured toward the laptop. What are those? For a split second, a dark look crossed Candy's face. He was my first love. The boy in the pictures was her high school sweetheart. Her entire youth had revolved around him, but they were eventually forced to break up because Mrs. Harrison disapproved. He moved abroad after that, and I lost touch with him, she explained. My eyes burned with tears, and my voice broke. Then what about me? What does that make me? If you still had feelings for him, why did you agree to marry me? Candy panicked, grabbing both of my arms. That's not true, Sonny. You're the only one I love now. If you don't believe me, I could delete all of them right now. And she did, deleting every last photo. She held me, apologizing over and over, promising that from then on, her heart would belong only to me. And I believed her, until the day Ethan Clark showed up again. She cast me aside without a second thought. My thoughts snapped back to the present, where Candy was urging her grandmother to leave the room. After she was gone, Candy pulled a credit card from her pocket. What Grandma gave you is from the Harrison family, she said. This card is for my personal accounts. It's all for you and Noah. I didn't refuse it. It's what I'm owed. She seemed to hesitate, reaching out as if she wanted to hug me, like she always did. I am sorry, Sonny. I couldn't keep my promise to grow old with you. I'll make it up to you in the next life. The grief in her eyes looked so real. I found it laughable. She probably had no idea I already knew about her wedding to Ethan. Maybe she thought I hadn't seen through her lie about being sick. Get divorced on January 8th, then get married right after. Candy, I said, we're about to be divorced. You could drop the act. I didn't spare her feelings. I just picked up our son, who had just woken up, and walked out. Candy just sat on the edge of Noah's bed, completely still. If she had just been honest and admitted she'd fallen for someone else, that she had cheated, I might have had a shred of respect for her. The new year passed in a blur of absurdity. Candy didn't show up again until the morning of the 8th. From snippets of conversation I overheard from the staff, I gathered she had been spending all her time with Ethan. On the morning of January 8th, I was waiting by the main gate of the Harrison estate. Candy pulled up in her car. Sonny, we don't have to rush this. I can still hold on for a while longer, she said. My expression remained cold as I motioned for her to unlock the doors. Let's go. City Hall should be open. The silence in the car was heavy. When we got there, I walked inside without a word to her. Since the holidays had just ended, the building was mostly empty. It was our turn quickly. The clerk asked the standard question. Are you certain you wish to proceed with the divorce? I nodded. Yes. Candy seemed taken aback by my firm resolve, and her gaze was filled with a strange reluctance. Sonny, she started, worried about Noah at home by himself. I cut her off impatiently. Are we doing this or not? Candy let out a soft sigh. Let's do it. After leaving City Hall, I hailed a cab back to the Harrison mansion. The moment I walked in, I heard Noah crying. My heart leaped into my throat, and I ran toward the sound. What I saw made my blood boil. A girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, was sitting on top of Noah, riding him like a horse. She was even yelling, "Giddy up," and not a single one of the maids standing nearby did anything to stop her. Noah's little face was being scraped against the rough floor, leaving raw, bloody marks. His breathing was shallow, but he was still calling for me. Daddy! Rage exploded in my chest. I rushed forward and shoved the girl off him. What do you think you're doing? I gathered Noah into my arms, my heart aching as I examined his injuries. Lily, a man's voice called out from behind me. He ran over and scooped the little girl into his arms. Mr. Miller, Lily is just a child. How could you push her like that? I let out a cold laugh and slapped him hard across the face. She was hurting my son. She deserved it. He staggered back, clutching his cheek. A second later, someone grabbed me and pulled me away forcefully. Sonny, what are you doing? It was just children playing. Why are you making such a big deal out of it? Candy yelled, and Ethan was just worried about his daughter. Did you really have to hit him? She had pulled me so hard that I lost my balance and fell, still clutching Noah. I looked up at her and smiled, but I couldn't hide the pain in my eyes. Candy, do you even remember that you're Noah's mother? I asked, my voice trembling. Look at his face. How can you say that? Candy's face went pale, and she was speechless. I shot her one last cold look before carrying my son toward the family's records room. Pushing the doors open, I walked straight to the large, leather-bound family registry on the main table. I flipped to the page with Noah's entry. Seeing the words, Noah, son of Candy Harrison, a shadow crossed my face, and I raised my hand to tear it out. Candy's husband, Mrs. Harrison's voice echoed from the doorway. With a sharp tearing sound, Noah's page was ripped from book. The paper drifted to the floor. What have you done? Mrs. Harrison stormed over, leaning on her cane, and slapped me hard across the face. My head snapped to the side from the force of the blow. Noah is a Harrison. How dare you remove him from our family records? I didn't understand her intense reaction. Hadn't Candy already explained everything to her? Mrs. Harrison, Candy and I are divorced. We just signed the papers, I said. Noah is my son. He'll be taking my last name, Miller, so he can't be in your family registry. I looked at her, confused. Didn't Candy explain this to you? My confusion must have been obvious. Candy rushed in just then and saw the torn page on the floor. She took a few steps forward, her eyes wide. Mrs. Harrison, who had run the Harrison empire for decades, instantly realized she'd been played. She swung her cane with surprising force, striking Candy hard on the shins. You told me you had an agreement. You said he could take the boy, but Noah would keep our name and remain in the family records, she roared. You dare lie to me? Hearing that, it all clicked into place. Candy had been lying to both of us. I stood off to the side, let out a cold snort, and held Noah a little tighter. Then I walked right past them. I have no interest in your family's drama. I'm taking my son, I said. From this day on, consider our connection to the Harrison family severed. We will never see each other again. And with that, I walked out with Noah. Ethan Clark scurried past me as I left. The sounds of their argument followed me down the hall. Grandma, please don't be angry, Candy pleaded. You love children, don't you? Look at Lily. She can be your sweet little granddaughter. Wouldn't that be nice? Ethan's fawning voice chimed in. Grandma, Lily is my daughter. I know she'll be a wonderful and devoted granddaughter to you. But Mrs. Harrison wasn't about to be swayed by their empty words. Get out. Both of you, get out of my sight, she bellowed. The Harrison family will not accept some child with questionable parentage. If you dare bring this man into our family, I will disown you. Their voices faded as I walked away. With my suitcase in one hand and Noah in the other, I got into a taxi headed for the airport. The mansion I'd called home for 5 years shrank into a tiny dot in the distance. And with it, I buried 5 years of my life. Noah was quiet in my arms, not crying or fussing, as if he understood what was happening. His little head rested quietly against my chest. Our plane took off from New York, heading for the quiet coastal city of Charleston. My parents knew I was coming and were waiting for me at the airport. The moment my mom saw me, tears streamed down her face, her eyes filled with pain for me. With her eyes red, she took Noah from my arms and held him close, not asking a single question. She just looked at me and said, It's okay. You're home now. Your father and I have our pensions. We can easily take care of both of you. My dad, a classic man of few words, just quietly picked up my suitcase. It's good you're back, he said gruffly. I'm not too old to help you look after the boy. Seeing my parents, I finally felt a sense of peace settle over me. My eyes filled with tears and my voice was hoarse as I said, Mom, Dad, I'm sorry I made you worry. Once we were home, my parents never brought up what happened in New York. That weekend, They went with me to the courthouse to legally change Noah's last name. After that, Noah was officially Noah Miller, his name recorded in our family's history. Noah gradually settled into his new life. He spent his days dragging my dad all over town, exploring every street and alley. I started picking up my old translation work again, taking on freelance projects online. I used to be one of the top students in my program. Everyone thought I was destined to become a professional interpreter for a major organization. But instead, I threw it all away for a foolish infatuation and dove headfirst into the trap of marriage. I was sitting in our small yard, working on a translation, when I heard Noah and my dad laughing. Mixed in with their voices was a woman's I didn't recognize. "Mr. Miller, really, you don't have to thank me. It was nothing." Her voice was warm and steady. Then I heard Noah's little voice pipe up. "Auntie, you saved me. Daddy taught me. I have to say thank you. I'm too little to pay you back, but my daddy can." A moment later, the three of them came into view. My dad was carrying Noah, and walking beside them was a woman with a kind face. "Dad," I called out. My dad smiled and made the introduction. "Sonny, we were just out, and Noah nearly fell into the creek. Jessica here saved him." My heart leaped into my throat. I rushed over and took Noah into my arms, my heart pounding. "Are you okay?" I asked, holding him tight. "What have I told you about listening to Grandpa and not running off?" Noah just buried his face in my shoulder. "I am sorry, Daddy. I made you worry," he mumbled, his head down. I sighed softly. Turning to the woman, I lowered my head, slightly in gratitude. "Thank you for saving Noah." She just looked at me for a moment without saying anything, then broke into a wide, easygoing smile. "Don't mention it. It was nothing," she said, casually tugging at the hem of her shirt. She seemed to have already forgotten about it. Just then, my mom came out of the house. "Oh, you're all back. And Jessica, you're here. Perfect. You can stay for dinner." Clearly, my mom already knew her well. She nodded, walking into the house like she'd been there 100 times, and went straight to the kitchen to help bring out the food. We all sat down at the table. Jessica sat directly across from me. I could tell my parents were trying to set us up, but I wasn't ready to even think about that. The dinner was pleasant, and afterward, I walked her to the door. I stood at the doorway. "Jessica, I know what my parents are trying to do," I said, "but right now my only focus is on taking care of Noah. Everything else has to wait." I expected her to be disappointed. Instead, she just smiled and waved her hand dismissively. "No problem. If you're not interested, that's totally fine," she said. "We can just be friends. I work down at the marina. I have a little boat. If you ever want to, you should bring Noah by sometime." I looked into her eyes, trying to see if she was just being polite. But all I saw was genuine sincerity, not a hint of disappointment. I found myself smiling back. "Yeah, okay. If we have some free time, we'll do that." For now, this was more than enough. I had almost forgotten everything that happened in New York. As it turned out, not even Mrs. Harrison's objections could stop Candy from marrying Ethan Clark. The guests began to arrive at the wedding venue. The hall was overflowing with flowers, supposedly because the groom adored them. Candy stood before the mirror in her white wedding gown, but her eyes held none of the joy of a bride about to marry the man she loved. Instead, they looked desolate. Her assistant came in. "Ms. Harrison, it's time." Candy stood motionless for a long time before she finally began to walk toward the door. When she reached the altar, she felt a strange sense of confusion. 5 years ago, she had stood in a place just like this, marrying me. Because her grandmother had forced that marriage, she had never paid much attention to the details of the ceremony. She didn't think it had been as lavish as this. I had mentioned it to her countless times after we were married. "Candy, our wedding was so rushed. The decor wasn't my style at all," I'd say. "Let's have another one someday." She could still remember her reply. She always said, "Okay, when we have more time, we'll plan another one." That someday never came. In 5 years, she never gave me the wedding I wanted. That old feeling of regret washed over her. When she snapped out of it, Ethan was standing before her in his tuxedo. The moment she saw what he was wearing, the color drained from her face. But she forced herself to stay composed and took his hand. The officiant looked at the couple and began the ceremony. "Do you, Ms. Harrison, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to love and to cherish, for richer or for poorer?" Candy's mind felt foggy. The officiant's voice seemed to be coming from far away. He had to ask her a second time before she finally spoke. Ido. The officiant then turned to Ethan. He answered quickly, almost eagerly. Ido. By the time the ceremony was over, Candy was completely drained. She wondered why she hadn't felt this tired when she married me. During the reception, Ethan changed into a white tuxedo. He walked up to Candy, reaching for her arm, but she pulled away. Candy, he asked, confused. Ethan's eyes were filled with confusion. He didn't understand why she wouldn't let him touch her. Why did you wear that tuxedo? I picked out several others for you, Candy said, her face grim. A flicker of jealousy crossed Ethan's face. Candy, I just thought it looked nice. I wanted to look my best on our wedding day. Candy stared at him for a long moment before turning and walking away without a word. It was impossible to tell if she believed him. She went to a quiet corner of the reception hall and started drinking alone, hidden behind a large floral arrangement. A moment later, she heard footsteps stop nearby. She could hear them talking. That new guy with Miss Harrison. He looks so familiar. Another man chuckled. He should. That's her old high school flame. The old lady broke them up years ago. The guy moved abroad after that. But the first man still looked puzzled. No, that's not it. Wait, I remember now, he exclaimed. I've seen him in the States. He's a well-known gigolo up there. Makes a living off of rich, older women. At his words, the other men in the corner were stunned. Are you serious? One asked. The man nodded confidently. Absolutely. I remember him clear as day. The group murmured in shock. Then Miss Harrison has made a huge mistake, leaving her husband and son for a guy like that. Candy didn't hear anything they said after that. After the men walked away, Candy emerged from her hiding spot. As she approached the dressing room, she heard voices from inside. It was her assistant. Sir, what do I do? I just realized I made a mistake. I sent one of the wedding invitations to Mr. Miller. A long silence followed. Finally, Ethan's voice broke the quiet. Don't worry about it. The guy is long gone. What does it matter if he got an invitation by mistake? The assistant's panic was a stark contrast to Ethan's casual tone. But that means Mr. Miller knew all along. He knew MS. Harrison's cancer was a lie, and that the real reason for the divorce was so she could marry you. What she finds out. The panic in the assistant's voice was unmistakable. Outside the door, Candy felt her legs give way. She swayed, her hand trembling as she gripped the doorframe for support. Before Ethan could reply, Candy kicked the door open. The loud bang made both of them jump. Her face was a mask of fury as she stared them down. The assistant's face went white, and he began to stammer. Ms. Harrison, he didn't get to finish before Candy held up a hand to silence him. You've been lying to me this whole time? She demanded, her voice shaking with rage. You weren't married when you were abroad. You were a kept man, living off other women. She screamed at him. Answer me. Ethan flinched, then raised his eyebrows in feigned confusion. Candy, what are you talking about? I don't understand a word you're saying, he said, trying to change the subject. We should get back to our guests. But Candy wasn't buying it this time. She kicked a nearby armchair, sending it skidding across the floor. You're still lying. Someone at our wedding saw you in the States. They know what you are. You're still lying to my face. Hearing this, Ethan finally panicked. What he did in America wasn't exactly a secret. It was entirely possible someone had recognized him. He rushed forward and grabbed Candy's sleeve. Candy, please, I didn't mean a lie. I just did it because I love you so much. Candy's face was like stone as she shoved him away. So your daughter being sick, that was a lie too? How many lies have you told me? Her chest was heaving with fury. Get out, she screamed. Get out of my sight and never come back. She waved over security to drag Ethan away. Her assistant stood frozen in the corner, terrified. Ms. Harrison, he whispered. Candy took a deep breath and pointed a trembling finger at him. Tell me again. Everything you just said. The assistant was too frightened to even lift his head. He was terrified he'd be dragged away just like Ethan. He stammered his way through the story. The day you filed for divorce, he had me start sending out the wedding invitations. And I wasn't paying attention, and I accidentally sent one to Mr. Miller. Candy stood there as if she'd been struck by lightning. She couldn't bring herself to think about the implications of what she had done. She couldn't bear to imagine that Sonny might have known she was lying to him all along. She couldn't face the truth. Candy returned home in a daze. She locked herself in the records room and knelt all night, emerging the next morning looking pale and exhausted. Mrs. Harrison had already heard everything from the staff. She stood waiting for her, leaning on her cane. "So, what are you going to do?" she asked, her voice calm but tired. Candy looked up, her eyes shot with red. "Grandma, I have to find him. I have to tell him the truth." Mrs. Harrison let out a long, weary sigh. "Oh, you," she said, shaking her head. "You've had such an easy life. The moment something doesn't go your way, you scheme and plot until you get it." She paused. "This time, you even lied to your own grandmother." Candy hung her head in shame. "Grandma, I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me." Mrs. Harrison's expression was one of deep disappointment. She sighed again. "Well, if you've made up your mind, then go." After a moment, she gestured to the guards behind her, who brought a man forward. "Here, take him with you. It might make your apology seem more sincere." "Yes, Grandma." Candy took Ethan and drove all the way to my new home in Charleston. There, in the yard of the charming little house, sat the man she thought about day and night. She took 2 steps forward before she could stop herself. He was right there, so close, yet she felt a wave of apprehension and couldn't bring herself to speak. Candy took a deep breath, steeling herself, and knocked on the gate. "Sonny," I heard my name and shot to my feet. The papers I'd been working on scattered across the ground. Seeing her familiar face, I felt a strange sense of dislocation, as if looking at a ghost. I realized I had nearly forgotten all about those 5 years. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice flat and even. She seemed flustered, fumbling with the door of the car behind her. She pulled Ethan out of the back seat. He was much thinner now, all of his former good looks gone. I came to apologize," she stammered, "to beg for your forgiveness." The regret in her voice sounded real. I just stared at her, saying nothing. When I didn't respond, Candy dropped to her knees. "Sonny, I know you know everything. That the medical report was fake, that I did it all so I could marry him," she cried. "It was my fault. I was so blind, so stupid. He tricked me. Please, just give me a chance to make it up to you." She pressed her forehead to the ground and didn't move. My voice was calm, completely unmoved by her performance. "Are you done? If you're done, you can go." Candy's face went pale. "Sonny, I really am sorry. Look, I brought him here for you," she said, gesturing to Ethan. "Hit him, yell at him, do whatever you want." I just shook my head, completely indifferent. "There's no need. Candy, from the moment I left New York, I cut all ties with you, your family, and that entire city," I said. "As for him, you can take him back the same way you brought him. I don't care anymore." Tears streamed down Candy's face as she sobbed. Just then, Jessica came out of the house, holding Noah in her arms, drawn by the noise. "Who is it?" she asked. I turned to look at her. A genuine smile spread across my face, my eyes softening. "It's no one important," I said gently. Jessica nodded and came to stand beside me. Noah looked down at the woman kneeling on the ground, his expression puzzled. "Daddy, who's that? Why is she at our house?" It had been so long. Noah had completely forgotten who she was. I leaned down and kissed his cheek. "You don't remember her? That's okay, it doesn't matter." I set Noah down and turned my attention back to Candy. "Candy, you can see for yourself that I'm doing just fine now," I said. "I have someone who truly cares for me. My parents are healthy, and Noah is thriving. As for those 5 years in New York, let's just say it was all a bad dream. And now that I'm awake, I've forgotten it." Every word was like a shard of glass piercing Candy's heart. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. After a long moment, she struggled back to her feet. "Okay," she whispered. "I understand." She pulled Ethan up and walked away, tears streaming down her face. Her silhouette seemed so lonely as she walked out of my life for good. For years after that, Candy carried on as if nothing had happened, continuing to be a formidable force in the business world. But she was always alone. As the years passed, she slowly faded from the public eye. As for Ethan, Candy had sent him back to the States long ago. Having been the other man for so many women, there was no shortage of angry husbands looking for revenge. His life became a living hell, and it was rumored that Candy had a hand in his misfortune. Eventually, she left New York and moved to some small, unknown town. She became a vegetarian, saying it was a form of penance. She dedicated her life to charity, donating almost her entire fortune. She even started teaching in underserved rural communities. After that, news of her became scarce. The year I turned 30, I proposed to Jessica. By then, Noah was starting elementary school. We got married in the same small yard where we first met. It wasn't a lavish wedding. There are no extravagant flowers or fancy decorations, just simple, joyful ornaments. Jessica had laid down a simple red runner on the path, sweeping every inch of it herself. It was a gesture filled with love. I held the ring she had made for me, and I wore the suit she had so carefully chosen. Noah, dressed in a tiny suit, acted as my best man. The yard was filled with our neighbors, all wishing us well. To a long and happy life together, they cheered. It's about time you two made it official. My parents' eyes were red with happy tears. Jessica's eyes were also glistening as she leaned in to kiss me. "Sonny," she whispered, "I'll spend the rest of my life being good to you, and you can spend the rest of your life holding me to that promise." I said, "Okay." As we finished our vows, sunlight streamed into the yard, and all the pain of the past was finally buried by a deep and lasting happiness. The old scars on my heart had finally found someone to weep for them and to heal them.